We had people over the other day. We talked, laughed, and filled the house with cheer. In fact, there was so much commotion that you could barely hear yourself think. As friends began to say goodbye and take their leave, I noticed something I hadn't before. So familiar yet new. I was hypnotized by its endlessness. I might try to make it stop, but it wouldn't make a difference. I could crush it, melt it, or throw it in a lake, yet the ticking of time would never really stop. The sun would still set, the night would still be followed by the day, and the earth would keep spinning as it slowly made its way around the sun. And time would just keep going. I felt as though I was caught in between everything that had happened and anything that could happen. Those eyes endlessly mocked me as I stood there, waiting for me to resume my existence. Although it's a subject so large it could fill a decade's worth of graduate papers, I wanted to understand more. We do, after all, have an endless trove of knowledge at our fingertips. Just the sheer number of YouTube videos dedicated to the subject of time is quite impressive. Time doesn't exist. The brain is the master of time. What actually are space and time? Time does not exist. Let me explain with a graph. The mind-bending physics of time. Does time exist? Alan Watson, The Illusion of Time. Then, of course, there are pages of songs named after time. Time by Pink Floyd, Time by Hans Zimmer from the movie Inception, Time by NF, and Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. There's a lot to learn, and yet the ticking of that clock felt like there was something more than philosophies of time or theorizations of time. It wanted to be known and understood. The first lesson I would learn through my journey of understanding time was learned in the midst of perhaps one of life's most enigmatic experiences. Not long ago, I had the opportunity to witness a total solar eclipse. From all the reading I had done, I had a pretty good idea of what to expect. Still, there were some things I was certainly not prepared for. Although Totality was about 3 minutes from where we were located, it felt as though only 20 seconds had rolled by before the sun came piercing past the moon again. Time looks different depending on how we're experiencing it. Some moments feel long, like waiting for summer vacation as a kid, while others feel short, like the joy of a wedding day. Much like stepping back from a building project to fully appreciate its beauty and complexity, stepping outside of time, or at least our perception of it, gives us a fuller appreciation for it. Stepping back was something I had been doing since I was young. As a kid, I would open the garage door of our suburban home, pull up a chair, and just sit there, staring into the silence of a cold Michigan winter. In college, I would go for lone walks at midnight along a bike path. There, I would sit on a hill that overlooked the majority of campus. At midnight, the otherwise bustling hustle of a college campus felt completely still and otherworldly. During my job as a campus safety officer, I would find myself in spaces like these often. Spaces that felt ethereal. They were empty, often dark, and silent. It wouldn't be until about 10 years after experiencing these spaces for myself that I would learn someone, somewhere, had put a name to them. Odds are you may have heard the term before. Liminal spaces. Generally defined, the word liminal can mean a space occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold, much like the position between moving out of your old place and moving into a new place. Likewise, the word can relate to a transitional or initial stage of a process, such as the transition from adolescence to adulthood. The term liminal has quite a broad meaning. It can be applied in many ways and to many disciplines. Liminality is a term used in psychology, physics, anthropology, and philosophy. There are liminal aesthetics, liminal music, and, of course, liminal spaces. The term liminality was first coined by Arnold von Gennep in his 1909 book, The Rites of Passage. In his book, von Gennep points out those features of the rites of passage that are present in every diverse culture on Earth. Furthermore, von Gennep segregates the passage of rites into a threefold structure: preliminal rites, or the rites of separation from what was, liminal rites, or the rites of transition, and postliminal rites, or the rites of incorporation into something new. Commenting on this threefold structure, von Gennep remarks that whoever passes from one to the other finds himself physically and magico-religiously in a special situation for a certain period of time. He wavers between two worlds. It's this idea of wavering between two worlds that photos of liminal spaces try to encapsulate. Perhaps you've seen pictures of what are considered to be liminal spaces. From the ever-growing subreddit to those peaceful playlists on YouTube, images and illustrations of liminal spaces are hard to miss. Yet, being in a liminal space is remarkably different from seeing a photo of one. In fact, photos of liminal spaces aren't actually liminal spaces. They're merely a representation of one. That's why photos of liminal spaces are classified as liminal aesthetics. A space is only liminal in so much as it is lived in or experienced. They're spaces that are authentically personal and unique. This photo, for example, is a representation of a liminal space that I once lived in. The photo itself, however, is only an aesthetic to those other than myself. For some, liminal spaces feel unnerving and eerie, and I know a place that might be perfect for it. There's something about an empty downtown area that feels strange. Photos of places like these can leave you feeling uncanny and anxious. Yet, what makes these photos and these places feel uncanny and anxious aren't necessarily the same qualities and attributes that make a space feel liminal. Dark corridors, odd image composition, and low resolution are just a few of the features that make photos like these feel unnerving. Yet take away the dark corridors, odd composition, and low resolution, and the space still feels liminal, but not as uncanny or unnerving. Furthermore, the more familiar a liminal photo is in relation to our personal history and experience, the more likely we are to have a positive interaction with it. Inversely, the less familiar we are with a liminal photo, the more likely we are to have either no reaction to it or a negative reaction to it. Put together, unfamiliar photos of liminal spaces that are dark, low resolution, and uncanny are much more likely to convey a sense of eerie uneasiness. The same can be said of liminal photos that bring you a sense of peace and serenity. Features such as a familiarity with places you've been and a nostalgia with your personal history aren't necessarily qualities that make a space liminal. These qualities may exist in some liminal photos, but not in all or even most of them. This is why we can't truly define liminal spaces based solely on liminal aesthetics or liminal photos. The only way to genuinely understand the importance and significance of these spaces, particularly in relation to our journey towards time, is to live in and experience one. In his video, Strange But Familiar Places, a critical analysis of liminal spaces, Farrell McGuire uses the term sterile to describe the underlying nature of liminal spaces. It's in these experiences where you find spaces that are devoid of things. But not only are they devoid of people and things, but they're also devoid of danger. As a result, in these insulated and sterile spaces, we find the perfect environment for creating the experience of suspended time. Living in a liminal space, or being present in one, creates with it the illusion that time has stood still. During our day-to-day, life is constantly changing. One task to the next, one responsibility to the next, one thing after another, and one event followed by the next. In a liminal space, however, change stops, or at least our experience of it does. A sterile, calm, and peaceful environment is what gives rise to our perceived suspension of time. Time equals change. It's constantly moving, and we are too along with it. In fact, change is one of the only guarantees we have in life because it's been happening since time began. Liminal spaces create an absence of time, or the illusion of it. So as a result, liminal spaces are unchanging places. They're places where life slows down just enough so that we can pause and glimpse at the ever-changing world around us. Places where we can find the past that has brought us to the present. Places where we find the freedom to think, ponder, reflect, and consider ourselves and our thoughts about the world. They're places that not only remind us that there is an incredibly big and diverse world out there filled with people so different from us, but they also remind us of how complex and personally intimate our stories are. It's as though our entire history suddenly fits in a single moment of suspended time. So why is this so important? Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher who lived in the 19th century, once said that life must be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. Kierkegaard wanted to capture the tension and paradox of the human experience. Only through reflection can we have an understanding of our lives. By looking back, we can see the causal relationships that have shaped who we are today. And yet, despite the importance of reflection, we can't live our lives constantly looking back. We must make decisions and take actions in the present if we are to have a future. In other words, life must change. It does so for everyone. The opportunity to pause and reflect is why liminal spaces are not just enjoyable, but why they're also valuable. Everyone, especially in today's world, seems so busy. We're pursuing one thing after the next, going from one place to the next. We can hardly recognize the meaning of the word pause anymore. I've learned that liminal spaces are more than just a curiosity. They're more than just a subreddit or internet phenomena. They're a gift, an opportunity to pause, dwell in the memories of where you've been, and plan for the memories you'll make next. Socrates once remarked that the unexamined life is not worth living. He believed that knowledge could only be acquired through self-examination and questioning one's own beliefs and assumptions. By doing so, Socrates aimed to help people arrive at a deeper understanding of themselves and the world, ultimately achieving wisdom. Of all places to learn about time, I never imagined I would learn wisdom from liminal spaces. Am I wise? By no means. I don't have all the answers. But liminal spaces force us to recognize our position within life and within time and within the world at large. You can't help but be humbled by it. Liminal spaces reveal time to us like it is an endlessly flowing river in which we are merely a drop of water. The experience is humbling. And it is through humility that we are able to not only recognize the immeasurable vastness of the river of time we find ourselves in, but we're also able to learn from the time we've lived so that we might never waste the time we're given.